Peace, my family, and roll back to all the woke ones out there. Those coming out of that good cocoon for the first time. Welcome. This is your girl, the butterfly, and we about to take off. Let's go, family. Let's fly. I just want to send you all that good healing energy your way and hope you all are out there keeping your mind right. Oh, yes, and that good, not mine. Again, how y'all feeling today? That's a good question to ask yourself so you can understand how you feel and the energies that move within you. Alright now, hope you guys are keeping yourselves at a high vibration and most definitely cleansing those good old lows. I came on here today to share another clip from Dr. Malachi York's book called The Great Book of the Living the Holy Tablets. And this is in Chapter 7, The Living Soul. And this tablet is 29. And it goes like this: Purification and spiritual practice. 19 times 9 equals 171. And it goes like this. Lo, Nubians, I'm going to take you on a journey to learning the importance of purification and spiritual practice. You must always remember that you shall always take care of your spirit. And the first step is to take care of your physical body, which houses the spirit. 3 basic steps involved in spiritual practice are as follows: severely simple living, self-study, surrender to El, the Most High. Austerity does not mean physical abuse or severe rigors. It refers to self and strict control for the senses. It refers to strict control for the senses in order to conserve energy for higher pursuits. Austerity in this sense means fasting occasionally, rise earlier instead of sleeping late, and reducing certain physical comforts for the sake of higher or for the sake of greater control of the mind. Let me repeat that. And reducing certain physical comforts for the sake of greater control of your mind. What keeps the mind flowing in a desired direction? Question. What keeps the mind flowing in a desired direction? Question. Surrendering to El, the Most High's will. One also surrenders the fruits of work performed. This is selfless, where one regards oneself as the instrument of El, and it serves humanity with no thought of either credit nor blame. El doesn't not work for you. El does not work for you. He works with you. Ignorance is the unawareness of reality. You can't really ignore a talking, moving person. It is identification with the temporal world rather than with the imperishable self. Egoism is the I-ness and minus, which creates the illusion that the physical body is the real you. Likes/dislikes. When a person is swayed by feelings of attraction and aversion, he or she is identifying with the material world, and he is setting him or herself up for the pain of loss and disappointment. Fear of death or clinging to life is binding and stifling. None can say when death will come. Fear of death is useless imagination, a waste of energy, and it creates waves of pain which exist only in the mind. Ignorance is the cause of the above-mentioned afflictions which follow it, whether they be latent or weak or suppressed or agitated or aggravated. The suffering which comes from egoism, attractions, repulsion, and fear of death all stem from ignorance, regardless of the degree in which they manifest. As the root of the other obstacles, ignorance of the true nature of the self is the identification with the body and the mind. When ignorance is replaced by enlightenment, all other causes of pain automatically disappears. When in a state of ignorance, if any innocent mistakes what is mundane for what is supreme, he or she cannot differentiate between that which will bring pain to the mind and body and that which will bring immortality. Egoism is manifested when the individual cannot distinguish his or her self from his or her senses and mind, and he or she sees him or herself as separate from the rest of the innocent, mortal, forgetful being, reacting to others with a sense of competition rather than cooperation. Attraction is that which dwells on pleasure. Most think of attraction and pleasure as positive things, but when associated with objects of material world, they inevitably bring pain. Nothing in the physical world is permanent. Hence, the constant fear of loss and loss itself keeps those seeking pleasure in an unhappy state. This is why the spiritual person learns to cultivate a dislike for the worldly pleasures. In the event he or she is never disappointed or unhappy, the result, ironically, is that by not seeking pleasure, he or she is always happy. Just as attraction brings pain, so does aversion. The mental attitude of aversion is a negative one, and it often makes a neutral situation appear as if it were one to be avoided. It is not possible to avoid all distasteful circumstances when there are likes and dislikes. A person cannot be happy when there are likes and dislikes. A person cannot be happy He or she is dwelling on illusionary pairs of opposites rather than learning to be content in all situations and surrendering to El Elo's plan for his or her growth. Fear of death is the continuous desire to live, which is rooted even in the minds of the wise. The fear of death is the fear of the loss of identity, of letting go of the ego. Even when all else is given up, there is still the clinging to life. When these various afflictions are a mere distraction to the iceberg, they can be merged back into their cause by substituting the opposite and the mental modifications. For example, if the egotistical thoughts arise, they can be combated by focusing on the all and you being a part of a much greater love. If feelings of attraction or avoidance enters the mind, then contentment or acceptance can be substituted. If the afflictions are avert and there is a great distraction to the mind, they can be elevated through regular, meditation and prayer. The law of fate states every action brings about an equal and opposite reaction. Whatever is done to others will return to the door. Let me repeat that. Whatever is done to others will return to the door. And most people are continuously creating new fatal situations. This is due to ignorance and its accompanying afflictions. Before the final emancipation, all debts of fate must be worked out, whether one decides to do so in the present life or in a form of hell or on lower planes, which are referred to as hell. Each must reap what he or she sows. Various life experiences are due to the situations of fate that has earned him or her by his or her thoughts, words, and deeds. They have pleasure or pain as their fruit, according to whether there is virtue or vice. Understanding this, the spiritual person strives to do only agreeable actions and to accept peacefully the ill that comes his or her way, so that all his or her seeds of fate are burned and no new ones are sowed. Violence to others, whether in thought or word or deed, must be avoided. Non-injury means more than restraining from inflicting physical pain. Mental pain can be far more devastating when one is established in complete harmlessness. Even wild animals will approach in peace. The function of truth is to maintain harmony through trust. It is better to be silent than to tell a truth that will cause pain or that springs from a wrong motive. A truthful person has power, for what he or she says comes to pass, and his or her words becomes law. Cleanliness also extends to the mind. Only when the mind is purified of all things can it be a pure mirror for clear reflections. Laughter comes from stimulation, but a smile comes from inner peacefulness. Satisfied with self, the mind needs nothing else for its contentment, which it grows in proportion to awareness of the inner self. The mind shall not be affected by external objects. They may be possessed, but with detachment. Do not let them possess your mind. Ostinary means curdling the insatiable demands of the senses. Drink water instead of bad drinks. Practice silence instead of talking loud. Control greed. Counteract sleep by getting up early. When the mind learns that its demands for pleasure will not be met through the senses, it stops. It's useless wandering and turns inward. Control of the senses clears the way for such powers as telepathy and clairvoyance. Study of spiritual works and the holy tablets helps to keep a person on the right path. The book alone, however, can only take one so far, and it can lead to intellectual pride. Surrender to the will of El Elo, the Most High, is necessary, for ultimately everything depends upon His grace. When negative or harmful thoughts interrupt the mind, they can be overcome by consistent pondering over their opposite. One must be ever alert, always watching the mind. When useless thoughts, waves arise, immediately replace them with positive thoughts, thus creating new mental habits that are conducive to spiritual growth. Negative thoughts and emotions such as violence, whether committed, abetted, or caused through greed, anger, and delusion, and whether present in mild, medium, or great intensity, results in endless pain and ignorance. This is true whether the action is actually carried out, remains in thought form, or is incited in others, wherever the cause. Whether the degree of involvement, fate is still incurred. This is why it is necessary to substitute positive subliminal thoughts the moment negative ones are caught arising in the mind. One who is firmly rooted in nonviolence, this resonates this conviction to others. He or she is so powerful that not even violent thoughts can exist in his or her presence. The more a spiritual person flees from material objects, the more they seem to come to the Eno site. The forgetful being, the mortal. The purpose of this natural law is twofold. The first is so that he or she may be tested, confirmed in his or her own renunciation. And the second is so that he or she has a wise person, or the second is so that he or she as a wise person may appropriately dispense the wealth to benefit an enocyte. An enocyte is never or ever enocyte, the mortal, the forgetful being, is ever searching for happiness in external objects, but it can only be obtained when the mind is satisfied with what has been allotted, and it is no longer looking for attainment. When the mind is still and content, and happiness is automatic. When austerities, self-imposed disciplines are practiced, great will is developed, and the abilities of his or her physical body and senses are extended beyond what is considered normal. Only by surrendering one's will, one's ego, one's life to El Elo, the Most High, is the superconscious state obtained. The reality of an object is due to the uniqueness of change. Each object on the material plane can be identified and called a reality because it is made up of its own unique combinations of the three primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. An object that is not dependent on one's mind, but it still exists whether or not it proceeds by that mind. The soul absorbs all of the changes through in which the mind goes because it is the external witness. All true knowledge exists permanently in the self, while the mind is consistently being modified by thought waves. The mind is sometimes the mind is something that can be observed as an object. The mind is something that can be absorbed by an object and not the source of the knowledge, just as Kingu, or so-called Chikaku, and Lunar, which you call the moon, is not a source of light but a reflection of Shamash, the sun. It cannot perceive two things at once. Even though thoughts are formed in a split second, still only one thought form exists in the mind at one time. So it is impossible for the mind to be perceiving itself while it perceives something else. If one mind can perceive another, then there can be cognition, awareness of cognition, as well as confusion of memory. Let me repeat that. And there can be cognition, awareness of the cognition, as well as the confusion of memory. So I'm going to leave it at that, family. That is the end of this heading. And let you all know that this is all love, and it's all love. I'll let you know. If you have any questions, you can leave it in the comment section. I'll be happy to answer. Peace, my family.